If you're waiting for a sign that you should be pursuing aviation, then this might be it, or at least it might be the closest thing you're gonna get. So pay attention. I've gotten to talk to literally hundreds of people through this channel, through the comments, through my email list over at airplaneacademy.com, of people that have decided to finally take the plunge into aviation, and either as a hobby or as a profession. And those are the best emails to get, okay? People who finally say, you know what, I've been thinking about this for decades maybe, and this is something I finally want to pursue. I know I'm passionate about it, and I'm running out of time, and I want to do it. And my hope is I want that for you. I want, whether you're 20 or 80 years old or somewhere in between, if you are on the fence about aviation, because let's be honest, there's a lot to analyze, there's a lot to think about, and sometimes we can overthink it. Just plain and simple, we can overthink it. And I think some of us, maybe a lot of us, kind of need that gentle push to say, you know what? I'm not gonna have all the answers. I'm not gonna have it perfectly figured out, but I know it's something I'm passionate about, and I want to do something I'm passionate about, whether as a hobby or as a profession. So my goal is to unpack kind of 5 common reservations that we might have towards aviation, and let's just bust them. Like not in a throw caution to the wind kind of manner, because that's not my personality, that's not who I am. But I think at some point we just gotta go for it, right? And so if that's you on the fence today, I just want to give you my own opinion on some of those reservations, and let's get you off of that fence. So for those of you that might say, gosh, I just don't have time for this right now, the first thing I would say is, I don't know that you have much time left, right? I mean, not to sound overly dramatic or grandiose, but the clock's ticking, right? So for things that we want to do in our life, at some point, we just have to make it happen. We just do. Like, things don't happen unless you make them happen, right? And so, I know that there are seasons of life that maybe it's just truly not in the cards. Like our first baby is due in June. So it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna take up, studying for a new rating or something in the month of June. Like, that's a bad time. So I wouldn't say to someone in my situation, hey, you need to put it on the calendar in June. Like, that's a bad idea, right? But second thing I would say is let's carve out a time and put it on the calendar. So for me, June is a bad time to pursue a new rating or something, right? But at some level, we got to get it on the calendar. Could you say, hey, in 90 days from now, I'm starting the flight training, and 60 days from now, these, the things that I have going on that are taking a lot of my time, I'm going to find a way to batch them, or I'm going to get into a routine of just being more organized about my time so that I can make time for something. Like, at some point, we just can't use that as an excuse. Like, we got to spend time on the things that are important to us. And I know that's, easier for some people and harder for others. But at some point, I think we just got to take an honest look and say, am I really prioritizing this? Am I putting it on the calendar? And if not, let's do that. For example, when I left my job a year ago last weekend, to pursue entrepreneurship full time. Like, that was a year in the making to wake up really early every day. I got up at, this is crazy, but I got up every day at 4:30 so that I could work from about 5 until 8 and then go to my day job and work all day and stuff. But I had to get up early in order to get my businesses going to the point where they could support me full time. And so my wife was on board with that. And then I had to go to bed at 8 o'clock every night so I could wake up at 4 in the morning. And it was crazy, but it worked, right? And so at some point, you might have to get a little bit uncomfortable and try to make time for the things that you want to make time for. I'm not Superman. I'm not saying that was easy. I'm not saying, oh, you should be able to do that because I did. I'm not saying that. I just want to use it as an example and say, like, look, at some level, we got to make time for it. If you're thinking, gosh, I just don't know if I can learn everything to become a pilot, there's a lot to know here. I've got a couple of encouraging things to say to you. First, I would say that generally speaking, it's not necessarily like the actual subject matter that's hard about becoming a pilot. Like, it's not rocket science, like literally, right? Like, we're not flying rockets, we're flying airplanes here. And so it's not necessarily the subject that's hard to learn. It's usually just more the volume. Like, there is a lot to know to become a pilot. I'm still having to kind of restudy things and memorize things for the second or third or 10th time or whatever, right? But like, no one thing is usually that hard to comprehend. And I get, the second thing I'd say is that I get emails and comments all the time from pilots, from current pilots, from student pilots especially, that say, gosh, I was really overwhelmed the first 10 hours, but now I've got 20, 30, 50 hours under my belt. And like, it's becoming less intimidating to me because now what felt like a bunch of just random information I need to know, like, okay, now I've got some flight hours where I can start to see, like, I can kind of know where to store that in my brain or know how those things relate. And so it becomes a little bit less random, just raw memorization, and more like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I mean, there's some things you just have to, kind of hard memorize or whatever, but like in general, it totally gets easier with time. And the third thing I'd say to you is, like, just remember that no pilot has it all figured out. Like, this whole channel, Airplane Academy, is dedicated towards me just sharing what I'm learning, right? Like I'm totally learning. I try to be honest about things I don't know. And so don't take the mindset that I got to have everything perfectly memorized and so much time to, perfectly understand everything. Like if you want to become a pilot, be prepared to learn for the rest of your aviation journey. So don't get discouraged thinking that I just won't be able to learn all of it. For those of you asking, gosh, I don't know, Charlie, is like now even a good time to become a pilot? I would say the answer is absolutely. If you want to pursue it as a profession, I think now is still an awesome time to be a pilot. I mean, COVID aside, right? Obviously that's hurt the travel industry pretty dramatically, but I think as things improve, that's all going to come roaring back. And there's a huge need for pilots right now. There's a bubble bursting in the aviation industry when it comes to pilots because so many are retiring and hitting the forced retirement age. So airlines are in desperate need for new pilots. And so because of that, they're increasing the salaries for new recruits. And so it's becoming even more financially feasible to pursue aviation professionally. So it's a really good time to be a pilot. And then even as a hobby, I think, gosh, it's awesome. I mean, one of the things I love about being a pilot right now is that the technology is getting so good, even for guys like me, down in general aviation. Like the avionics are getting very sophisticated and they're getting a lot more affordable. So you can have some really cool technology on board, even on your iPad, right? Like there's things that are rapidly innovating right now that we have access to even as general aviation pilots. It's very easy to document and film your adventures that you can share on YouTube or just with your friends offline. Like that part is really fun, but then also think about things that have kind of changed since the pandemic, like hobbies like going RVing or, camping and boating. Like it's hard to find RVs right now for sale because they're in such high demand, to have socially distanced adventures and find ways to get out of the house that's still in a safe way and bring their family members and loved ones along. And I think aviation is one of those things. And so there's so many reasons that it's an awesome time to be a pilot. Don't let that hold you back. If you're thinking, man, I would love to pursue aviation, I just simply can't afford it, then you're definitely not alone. I think finances and time management are probably the two biggest reservations that the people rightfully have towards aviation. And I'm right there with you. Like I've had a hard time carving out time, for aviation. And there's been times in my life that I haven't flown much at all because of the finances of aviation. And so if that's you, like I can totally relate to you. And there's no shame in it. And so I just kind of want to take an objective view about money here, about money towards aviation, because I view money as a tool. I really try hard not to view money as a status or as an identity. And I think our culture can really, really do that. I could talk for a long time on that, about how I think we treat money in an unhealthy manner. But in the context of this video, I just want to take an objective view about it and kind of give you some of my thoughts as to what I've learned about the finances of aviation. The first thing I would say is that my personal view of the finances of aviation really comes down to two things. The first thing is that I always want to try to live within my means. If I make a lot or I make a little, I always want to try to spend less than I make. And if you can do that, it's going to be really hard to become upside down financially. I think it's a really good principle to live by to the best of your ability. And then the second thing is with whatever is left over, we all get to decide where our residual money, but also time, energy, effort, and care goes towards in our life. And so if I can live within my means and then with what is left over, if aviation can fit into that, I think about it kind of more holistically, not just money, but also time, energy, effort, care, all those things. If that can fit into my life, aviation can, then awesome. But if it can't, it can't, right? And I either need to move some things around and see if it's possible, or if not, then I need to wait for another season where that is possible. And so that's kind of my two-pronged approach to whether or not I can afford aviation right now. Not just afford it financially, but also afford it like time-wise and relationally with the other things I'm pursuing in my life, whether it's my wife or my spiritual life or just all the other important things in your life, right? I want to see if it can fit in while still living below my means. The second thing I would tell you if you're thinking I just can't afford it is to define what it means, right? Like there's a spectrum when it comes to aviation of expenses. It can be somewhat affordable or it can be like prohibitively expensive, like crazy, crazy expensive. So if you're just kind of thinking I can't afford it, well, let's make sure we have a really good idea of what it means, right? Like are you talking about airplane ownership? Are you talking about renting? Are you talking about joining a club? Like what is it, right? And so two other resources that might be helpful here if you need a little bit more data from my own own experience as to how much flying costs. There's a couple, and I'll link them down in the description. The first is talking about how much airplanes cost to own, and I cover 7 kind of commonly entry-level airplanes and how much they cost to purchase, to maintain, to fly, all that sort of thing. I think that could be a resource to you. The second thing is my own take on why I decided to actually buy an airplane about 6 years ago versus rent. And there was a very real moment where I decided I've been renting, this no longer makes sense, now I want to own. And so that might be another resource to you. And then if you're even earlier on in the process and trying to figure out how much even just getting licensed costs, then I've got a couple videos on how much the private usually costs, and then also your instrument rating if you're interested in that. And so all 4 videos will be down in the description to hopefully give you a little bit more data based on my own experience. The last thing I would tell someone who says, I just can't afford aviation, would be to give you my own experience that I had to change some things about my life in order to afford aviation. It really comes down to 3 things. The first was that I had to get on a budget. It's impossible for me to know if I'm living within my means, spending less than I make, if I'm not actually tracking it. Like, can I prove that to myself each month? And so I had to do a better job about actually getting on a budget and tracking that month over month. And there's tons of ways to do that. The way I like to do it is through mint.com, and I'm not an affiliate for them or anything like that. That's who I use. And so it imports all my bank transactions and I can categorize them, but then I like exporting those into Excel where I can do a little bit more manipulation with it, get it into kind of the view that I like so that I can see month over month how I'm trending, where my money's going. Is there some subscription that I just forgot about, or I thought I canceled, or I should cancel, or whatever? And so you can start to see the full picture of what you have to work with, right? So that's the first thing, getting on the budget. The second thing is changing some of your spending habits. Like, there is probably some expense that you can cut out. Not for everybody, but for most of us, there's some things we could do, we could change to free up some more money. And that comes through cutting some expenses, changing some of your lifestyle habits. And I definitely had to do that. Having a budget really revealed to me, where my money was going and what things I could change to free up some cash. But then the third thing is, even after you reduce your expenses, you might have to increase your income in order to make room for aviation. I know I did. And so I created a side hustle, actually a couple side hustles, to increase my income. Because even if you're at a salaried job, like, you're sort of in control of how much you make. I mean, your performance definitely plays a role, but even if you really just crush it all year and you're expecting a raise, like, what if the company says, hey, we had a year of a pandemic, we're not issuing raises this year, right? Like, you don't really have any control over whether or not they tell you that. And so at some point you might have to kind of try to take control of things yourself and start producing some income for yourself, which I've started many businesses, and I know that this is not an easy thing to do, but after many, many different businesses, I have found a repeatable side hustle that I do that really helps me afford flying. And so I'm actually putting a course together to just tell you how I do that. I want to help more people afford flying, and I think just kind of pulling the curtain back a little bit and kind of teaching you what I know will help do that. And so the way you can find out more about that is getting on my waiting list. The course will be live in about a month, but if you go over to airplaneacademy.com/join, you'll join the waiting list. In the meantime, you'll get 5 days worth of my biggest aviation lessons I've learned, both good and bad. And so you get some stuff, some learning lessons from me, some of the dumb stuff I've done in the meantime. But then you'll be on the waiting list for when I launch that course. So it might be interesting to you if you're looking for some side hustle money. So those 3 things: get on the budget, make some lifestyle changes to the extent you can, and then if you need to, find a way to increase your income, maybe through some side hustles. The last thing you might be thinking is, yeah, Charlie, I want to become a pilot. I just have no clue where to start. There's so much information out there. The options seem endless. And I would agree with you. It can seem kind of vague. So I'm going to give you 3 steps, super simple steps to getting started. The first is go sign up for a discovery flight at your local flight school. If you haven't already done one of these, they're usually like $100. Sometimes they're even free if you sign up for lessons afterwards. And it's basically an hour lesson for you just to get exposed to flying. You get to go fly in your little Cessna or Diamond or whatever, and you get to do the flying, and the instructor is going to help get you exposed to what flying is like and how lessons will go and those kinds of things. And those flights can be so transformational for people, that it really helps get them off the fence and say, yeah, I want to do this with the rest of my life professionally, or I definitely want to pursue this as a hobby. So go get a discovery flight. The second step is, at the end of that flight, get information about their process at that flight school for you becoming a private pilot. You can get your lesson plans, get the cost, get the structure, etc. And at least you've got the information there at your fingertips and the place to go do it. And then the third thing is I encourage you to sign up for my email list over at airplaneacademy.com/join, because I'm going to send you over the next 5 days the 5 biggest lessons that I have learned as an aviator in 16 years of flying. The good ones, the really bad ones. I mean, I promise you'll learn something, not because I think I'm so wise, but just because I have a little bit of experience and I've done some stupid stuff. And I try to package it into a simple 5-day series here that you can learn from, hopefully avoid some of the things that I have done. And then also, as mentioned earlier, that'll put you on the wait list for the other courses that I'm coming out with later that I hope will serve you in your aviation journey. So if there's a reservation you have that I didn't cover in this video, would you comment down below and just let me know what that is? I know I would love to talk to you down there. I know other pilots would love to join in and try to help get you off that fence and into the aviation community today. Let's do it. See you guys next week.